our study here. Last week, with my long introduction, we talked about the coming tribulation and the coming Antichrist. And so we also talked about the purpose of the tribulation, which was twofold. First, to bring judgment in the form of God's wrath on an evil Christ-rejecting world. And then second and the foremost is to bring the nation of Israel to repentance and to recognize their true Messiah, which is Jesus Christ, and allowing for God's covenants to be fulfilled, which are still in motion, and they're still waiting to be fulfilled. I use scripture to make a case for the pre-tribulation rapture, the pre-tribulation rapture of the church, which is us. I made reference wrongfully. I kept pronouncing Antiochus's name as Antiochus, which I had in my head because I was trying not to say that. And for some reason I said Antiochus, and it just stuck with me throughout the whole study. But his correct pronunciation of his name is Antiochus Epiphanes. So anyways, into my intro, we also we covered what typology is, the coming Antichrist, the 7-year tribulation, the third temple. I made a case for the rapture, talked about God's wrath and who receives it. We talked about the restrainer. Who is he and who is he restraining? And so that was pretty much done in my introduction. And then we covered in Daniel 8, verses 1 through 8, which is this vision that Daniel has. And that covered the 2 horns and the ram being the Medo-Persians. And then we had the male goat, who is Alexander the Great, and he is under the Greek Empire. And then we had 4 conspicuous horns, and they represented Alexander the Great's kingdom, which was divided after he died between his four generals. The importance of Alexander and the Greeks being used by God in the language used to record the New Testament is very important. And so God in his foreknowledge knew that he would be using the Greeks because the Greek language is very precise in its meaning versus English. For example, we use the word love in English, could mean several different things. I love my wife. I love God. I love hamburgers. I love Disneyland. So the same word has several different meanings. Whereas in the Greek, love could be more precise in different types of love, like agape love, for instance, is unconditional godly love. They have eros, which is an erotic or sexual type of love. Phileo, where we get the word Philadelphia, is brotherly love. Storge, for instance, is another one, parental love, the love you have for your children. So there's a few more meanings also, but those would be the main 4. So they use the Greek language, and it's very precise. And so with the New Testament written in Greek, we get a better understanding of the translation to English. And so if we go back and study the original words used in Greek, if we're having an issue trying to figure out, a meaning of a passage or whatever, we could look at a certain word and see what it means in the original Greek. So tonight we're going to learn more about the little horn, which we talked about in Antiochus Epiphanes, and the interpretation of Daniel's vision. So if you would, let's turn to Daniel chapter 8 and verse 9, and we will start with verse 9. So it says in verse 9, it says, and out of one of them came a little horn, which grew exceedingly great toward the south, toward the east, and toward the glorious land. I had something written down here in my note. So the little horn here, little horn is not the same as the little horn that we read about in chapter 7. So we have two little horns. We have two different empires. This is coming out of the Greek Empire, and the little horn from chapter 7 came out of the revived Roman Empire. So they have they're different empires, but they have very similar types or personalities. The former little horn comes out of what I said was the fourth beast, which is the Roman Empire, or revived Roman Empire. And then this one that we're going to read about tonight, it comes out of the Greek Empire. And so the little horn here refers to Antiochus Epiphanes, who was the 8th king of the Syrian dynasty, who reigned for about 11 years, from 175 BC to 164 BC. And this part of the prophecy skips ahead. So we have, it skips ahead to the Greek Empire. So we are now, when Daniel's having this vision or this prophecy, and it's going to skip ahead to 301, from 301 BC, which is the time of Alexander's empire, to 175 BC, which is when Antiochus became king. And so we see a lot of times prophecy will skip ahead, and they will have several double meanings. For instance, it skips ahead in Matthew 24 when Christ, he's talking about the destruction of the temple, and then a few paragraphs later, he's speaking of the time of the end during the Great Tribulation. So we'll see Scripture do this, or prophecy will do this. It'll skip around or skip ahead. It talks about toward the south. So Antiochus, when it speaks of the south, he invaded Egypt. And then toward the east is the land of Parthia and the glorious land, which is another name for Israel. There's really no Palestine. The Romans changed the name of Israel to Palestine, because when they took over, I think it was around 135 is when they changed, AD, when they changed the name from Israel to Palestine, and they gave the name of the land to Israel's former enemies, which were the Philistines. So Philistine, Palestine, that's how Palestine came about. So we can identify this period of historical fulfillment in Antiochus Epiphanes, because he took the throne of his father, his name was also Antiochus. He was Antiochus III, and Antiochus Epiphanes is Antiochus IV. A lot of information here. Antiochus, he murdered his brother, whose name was Seleucus Philopater, who was the rightful heir to the throne. And he ruled over Syria and Israel's land under the Seleucid dynasty. Antiochus IV, also Epiphanes, held his brother hostage in Rome and legitimized his rule mainly through flattery and bribery, which is similar to what the Antichrist will end up doing. Antiochus assumed the title Epiphanes, which means illustrious. It's alluding to deity, so he compares himself to God, or he thinks of himself as a god type of person. And so there's a lot more similarities here between Antiochus Epiphanes and the coming Antichrist. And we'll read about that in a bit here. The glorious land, like I said, refers to Israel, and in Hebrew is the same term used for the land of Israel in Ezekiel 20, Ezekiel 25, Daniel 11, several times, and then similar wording is used in Psalm 48. And we can rightly see the glorious land as the center of the world. It's the Israel's the center of the world. It's where God has, if we looked at a map from God's perspective, is Israel would be the center of the map. So it's the nerve center of civilization since the days of Abraham. Israel's the truth center from which flowed God's revelation to man. It is the storm center of warring nations since the times of Joshua. It will be the peace center of the earth during the millennial reign of Christ. And it will be the home center for the Jewish people forevermore. Moving on to verse 10, says, and it grew up to the host of heaven and it cast down some of the host and some of the stars to the ground and trampled them. So here the host of heaven and the stars is referring to God's people. And in his conquest, Antiochus, he murdered a lot of the rulers, and he persecuted the people of Israel. Antiochus was also infamous in his persecution for the Jews. He also wanted them to submit to Greek culture and to the customs, and was more than willing to use violence and murder to compel them. Verse 11, he even exalted himself as high as the prince of the host, and by him the daily sacrifices were taken away, and the place of his sanctuary was cast down. Because of transgression, an army was given over to the horn to oppose the daily sacrifices, and he cast truth down to the ground. He did all this and prospered. So Antiochus blasphemed God and commanded idolatrous worship directed towards himself. The little horn, like Lucifer, aspires to be like God. So we'll see that in both little horns. Antiochus wants to be like God. The Antichrist also wants to be like God and worshipped. He casts truth down, meaning the truth, meaning the Mosaic law. And then Antiochus, his suppression of the Jews came to a head in December of 168 BC, when he ordered his generals to seize Jerusalem on the Sabbath. And then there he sets up an idol to Zeus on the bronze altar in the temple and desecrated the altar by offering a sacrifice of swine, a pig, and then sprinkling the blood in the sanctuary, in the holy temple. So because of this, the Jewish sacrifice stopped because the temple is now desecrated by pig's blood. And then we can read, I don't know if, are you guys familiar with the Apocrypha? You'll find that in usually the Catholic Bible, which are some other books, biblical books that we don't really consider canonized, but they are good to go through for reference as far as historical reference. We can read the account of what Antiochus Epiphanes did in First Maccabees. I'll just read through some of these verses. I kind of wish Michael was here tonight because this is all done in Old English. That's how old this is. And it would be nice to hear him read his English accent. First Maccabees 1:29, this talks about the persecution, some of the persecution of the Jews. And it says, and after 2 years fully expired, the king sent his chief collector, so these generals, to a tribute unto the cities of Judah, who came in unto Jerusalem with a great multitude, and spake peaceable words unto them. I should do this in an English accent and might give more meaning. But spake peaceable words unto them, but all was deceit. For when they had given him credence, he fell suddenly upon the city and smote it very sore. That's a very old English, and destroyed much people of Israel. Verse 31, and when he had taken the spoils of the city, he set it on fire and pulled down the houses and the walls thereof on every side. But the women and children they took captive and possessed, the cattle, so they took spoil. There's talk of blasphemies. More, verse 41 of First Maccabees says, moreover, King Antiochus wrote to his whole kingdom that they should be one people, and everyone should leave his laws. So, they're basically, you got to give up your laws. So that all the heathen agreed. So these are the Gentiles that are living in Israel at the time, or Jerusalem. So the heathen agreed according to the commandment of the king. Yea, many also of the Israelites consented. So under pressure, a lot of the Jews consented to his religion and sacrificed unto the idols and profaned the Sabbath. For the king had sent letters by messengers unto Jerusalem and the cities of Judah that they should follow the strange laws of the land and forbid burnt offerings and sacrifice and drink offerings in the temple, and that they should profane the Sabbaths and festival days and pollute the sanctuary and the holy people. So he set up altars and groves and chapels of idols and sacrificed swine's flesh and unclean, that they should also, and then that they should also leave their children uncircumcised. So this goes against Jewish law that the child should be circumcised on the 8th day, and make their souls abominable with all manner of uncleanness and profanation. So instead of profane, it's profanation, to the end that they might forget the law and change all the ordinances. So they're going to, by just going through this, that they might forget all the law. Whosoever would not do according to the commandment of the king, he said he should die. And more persecution. So then as many people were gathered unto them, to wit, every one that forsook the law, and so they committed evils in the land, and drove the Israelites into secret places, even wheresoever they could flee for succor. Lost my place. Let's see. Now the 15th day of the month, which is Caslu. I don't know what that means, but I guess that's a day of the month. In the 145th year, they set up the abomination of desolation upon the altar, and builded altars throughout the cities of Judah on every side. So they built not just in the temple, but throughout Judah. And burnt incense at the doors of their houses and in the streets. And when they had rent in pieces the books, rent in pieces, that means probably tear to pieces, of the books of the law, which they found, they burned them with fire. And whosoever was found with the book of the Testament, in the Old Testament, or any committed to the law, the king's commandment was that they should be put to death. So if they had a Bible, if this was today, if they had a Bible, they should be put to death. Whosoever was found, let's see. Thus they did by their authority unto the Israelites every month. So this went on. It wasn't just a one-time event. To as many as were found in the cities. Now the 25th day of the month they did sacrifice upon the altar, idol altar, which was upon the altar of God. So they turned the holy altar of God into an idol altar. At which time, according to the commandment, they put to death certain women that had caused their children to be circumcised. This is terrible. They hanged the infants about their necks and rifled their houses and slew them that had circumcised them. So terrible, terrible persecution. And let's leave it at that. It won't compare to what the tribulation will be like. And we'll get into that in a bit. Verse 13. Then I heard a holy one speaking, and another holy one said to that certain one who was speaking, how long will the vision be concerning the daily sacrifices and the transgression of desolation, the giving of both the sanctuary and the host to be trampled underfoot? Basically a lot of what we just read there. How long? So the Holy One and another Holy One refers to angels, and they are asking, how long will this vision or the time of this vision be? And Daniel he doesn't ask the question. He heard only the holy ones or the angels speaking together, and one asks the question. So they wanted to know how long the sacrifices would be suspended and how long the sanctuary would be desecrated. Verse 14, moving on, he said to me, for 2,300 days, then the sanctuary shall be cleansed. So literally, Daniel heard a holy one say 2,300 days. And the date when the temple was cleansed is well established in history as December 25th of 165 BC. And so this is, if you're familiar with the story of Hanukkah, so this is where Hanukkah comes about. If we count back 2,300 days from then, we come to the year when Antiochus began his persecution, which would be 171 BC. So this passage is also, this is interesting. Pastor Ronnie might get something out of this. It's been a springboard for elaborate prophetic interpretations. So popular and tragic interpretation is where they took they take 1 year for every day. So in this case, 2,300 days, they took an interpretation of 2,300 years. So this guy by the name of William Miller used 2,300 year days to calculate that Jesus would return in the year 1844, just 2,300 years after Cyrus issued the decree to rebuild the temple. And his movement ended up giving birth, when it didn't happen, his movement ended up giving birth to the Seventh-day Adventists and Jehovah's Witnesses, as well as several other movements. And we can know that William Miller's and other year-day theories are wrong because the passage was fulfilled before the time of Christ. And Jesus, in John 10:22, he recognizes that the temple was properly cleansed and rededicated when he attended the Feast of Dedication, which commemorates the cleansing of and rededication of the temple after the desecration that was brought on by Antiochus Epiphanes. So it says, then the temple will be cleansed. So it's an amazing specific prophecy, which was written 350 years before the time of Antiochus. So that's when this vision takes place. It's great prophetic fulfillment like this, which demonstrates God not only knows the future, but he guides the future. His hand is upon the future. So, like chapter 7, chapter 8 also has an interpretation of Daniel's vision, and we'll pick up here in the second half of Daniel now and read about this interpretation. So, verse 15 says, "Then it happened when I, Daniel, had seen the vision and was seeking the meaning, that suddenly there stood before me one having the appearance of a man. And I heard a man's voice between the banks of the Uli." I remember that was one of the rivers, or that was a river that was talked about in the first part, um, where he was giving the in the citadel, and where the locations, and these were not well known at the time. So the reason why he gives these locations is that so people would know where they were. By the time all this comes about, everybody would know. So this also gives us the idea that uh, it is a prophetic. It wasn't written after the fact. Some people will say that Daniel's written in the second century. So if it were written in the second century, then there would be no reason to mention the Uli, because it would be well known at that point. So Daniel's seeking the meaning or the interpretation of this vision, and he sees suddenly before him an angelic being who has the appearance of a man. And so this is kind of interesting, because the Bible tells us that angelic beings can have the appearance of man, as well as the appearance of other types of creatures. If we look at Revelation, it talks about angelic beings that have several eyes all about them and whatnot. So in this case, this angelic being or angel takes on the appearance, or has the appearance, of a man. Hebrews 13:2, it tells us, "Do not forget or neglect." This is my paraphrase. "Do not forget or to neglect to entertain strangers, or rather to show hospitality. For by doing so, some have unwittingly or unknowingly entertained angels." And I know this in my experience in my life, just recently in the last 2 or 3 years. There have been times where I felt God has been testing me by sending people to me, just kind of strange encounters with people that made me think. I'm out running errands, for instance, and random people appear and will come up and ask me a question. Um, God type questions, asking about, whatever, something that's spiritual. And I'm like, it's kind of odd that they come up to me out of nowhere. And then when I look away, this happened 3 times that I can remember, maybe 2 years ago. When I look away, they're nowhere to be found. Like, and it happened within a week period. So it never happened before. It never happened again. But I felt like God was testing my reaction when these people came up to me. I think they could have been angelic beings, being sent to me to test how I, would react to their question or comments. I felt like God was using these people to test me, or to show me in that instance that he's preparing me for ministry, because this is where I was going through whether I'm being called into ministry or not. And so God was showing me that, I feel that he was showing me that he was calling me. So, and like I said, it never happened before, and it hasn't happened since. So, anyways, that's just my little story there. Here in verse 16, we're told for the first time, this is the first time in the Bible that we hear about the name of this angel, and his name is Gabriel. And Gabriel's not only mentioned by name here, but 3 other times in the Bible. So again, in Daniel 9:21, he's mentioned, in Luke 1:19, and then Luke 126. So we have a total of 4 times that the name of Gabriel is mentioned. Daniel 9:21, which we'll read next week. Gabriel sent to give Daniel an answer to his prayer. Luke tells us that Gabriel was an angel of the Lord who gave the news to Zacharias. If you know the Christmas story in Luke chapter 1, Zacharias is the father of John the Baptist. So he gives Zacharias the information that he's going to become a father and that his wife Elizabeth would bear him a son. And then again, Gabriel is the angel who appeared to Mary, the mother of Jesus, to tell her that she would conceive and give birth to Jesus. So Daniel hears the voice of a man calling to Gabriel. So these two that are having conversation. So he hears this man calling to Gabriel, the man's voice, to make Daniel understand. And we're not told who the voice is. It's possible that it could be God, or it could be, maybe Michael, the archangel. We don't know. But Gabriel, the name Gabriel means hero of God. And he is one of only 2 good angels that are mentioned, along with Michael the archangel. So we have 3 total if we consider Lucifer. Also, we have Lucifer, who was fallen, who became Satan, the name Satan. It's interesting to note that 1/3 of the angelic hosts fell with Satan, while 2/3 remained with the Lord. So you have 2 good angels. Possibly they're 3 different leaders. We have 2 good angels and 1 bad. I don't know. It's just a thought. Coming up in this next section here, verse 17, a lot of this is very difficult. There's a lot of interpretations. I'll read the verse and then we'll get into what some of the commentary is. Verse 17, so he came near, rather, where I stood. And when he came, I was afraid and fell on my face. But he said to me, understand, son of man, that the vision refers to the time of the end. And so because of the content of this vision and the powerful presence of Gabriel and the mysterious voice of deity, Daniel is afraid or maybe panic-stricken, and he falls on his face. And we see a similar situation, which isn't much different, in John the Apostle in Revelation 1, where he has the vision of the glorified Christ and falls on his face. So here Gabriel reassures him and instructs Daniel using the title Son of Man, which is, it's in the sense that Daniel, the Son of Man, Daniel is a mortal human. He's not angelic. And so in these next few verses, 17 through 19, we have Bible scholars are divided over whether this vision of Daniel focuses on Antiochus, or the man of sin described in the New Testament, who is the Antichrist, or maybe it refers to both. It's interesting because I have 5 different commentaries on this book that I've been going through, and I have 3 that have complete different views on what this section talks about. And then I have 2 that don't even touch the subject to avoid the controversy. So speaking of the time of the end, one of the views speaks of this prophecy as being fulfilled in Antiochus. Another view is that this time, this is the time before the second coming of Christ during the Great Tribulation with the Antichrist. And then there's another thought that this speaks of AD 70, when the Romans destroyed the temple and persecuted the Jews. So like I said, I kind of believe both Antiochus and the Antichrist are in view, because Antiochus is a type of Antichrist. We talked about types last week. The time of the end relates to Daniel's question as to the meaning. So I personally believe that the meaning of the time of the end is in fulfillment with the second coming of Christ. Verse 18, moving on, says, now as he was speaking with me, I was in a deep sleep with my face to the ground, but he touched me and stood me upright. And he said, look, I am making known to you what shall happen in the latter time of the indignation. For at the appointed time, the end shall be. So here we find Daniel is in a deep sleep with his face to the ground. And in his own vision, Daniel finds him. So Daniel is having a vision of, if you can picture this, he's having a vision of him laying asleep in a deep sleep with his face to the ground. So he finds himself in a deep sleep, or maybe he's fainted from fear. But we see Gabriel here touches him and sets him upright. Basically, he woke him up or aroused him and made him stand up. Gabriel then begins a further explanation of verse 17, which is concerning the time of the end. The latter time of indignation. So this is a note that I have here. Seems to refer to God's anger against Israel, such as God is permitting the persecution or the chastening of Israel at the time of the end. We know this is what will happen during the Great Tribulation. And we know from Zechariah and Jeremiah, Revelation, and some other books that the time of the Great Tribulation, that Israel will suffer great persecution, which is known as the time of Jacob's trouble, which is Jeremiah 30, verse 7. So this is one verse where the interpretation of the time of indignation leads many to believe that this prophecy has been fulfilled in Antiochus. And then others say it's God's wrath, or the time of God's wrath being poured out on the enemies or the unbelievers during the tribulation period. And so, we could spend like forever. If I went through this and started taking everybody's view, we'd probably spend another 2 weeks on something that's, in my view, is probably not as important. So rather than get into a lengthy discussion as to the time and who's going to fulfill it, I will say that this is one of these prophecies where it probably has a double meaning or a double fulfillment. First, in that Antiochus, being a type of Antichrist character, he persecutes the Jews, or persecuted and desecrated the temple by offering up swine on the altar. And then we talked about these typologies last week. He will put an end to the sacrifices. So the second is yet to be fulfilled in the beast, or this Antichrist. The Antichrist will also set himself to be worshipped in the rebuilt temple, and will persecute the Jews and the saints like no other time in history. Jesus says in Matthew 24:21 that there will be great tribulation, as has not occurred since the beginning of the world until now. So the beginning of the world until now is past, and then present, meaning the present time of Christ, and then nor shall ever shall. So there's a future. It hasn't been fulfilled as we know it yet in history. It's a future event. So the persecution, or this great tribulation that Jesus spoke of, had not occurred till then. It had not occurred as of yet, but it will occur in our future, or in the present future. So according to Jesus, and speaking after the fact that Antiochus, he's not the Antichrist. He is a type of Antichrist. And although terrible in itself is um, his tribulation is going to pale in comparison to the coming great tribulation. And also, by comparison, the persecution of the Jews by Hitler will also pale in compared to the persecution that they will suffer under the Antichrist. Um, I think I spoke on this last week that Zechariah 13, chapter 13:8, says that 2/3 of the Jews would be killed. 1/3 would come out of the tribulation, would be spared. So it's going to be a terrible time, the Great Tribulation. Let's move on to verse 20, and I will. Where are we at time? Verse 20, the ram which you saw having two horns, this is the interpretation, they are the kings of Media and Persia. And the male goat is the kingdom of Greece. The large horn is that is between its eyes is the first king. Verse 22, and as far as for the broken horn and the four that stood up in its place, 4 kingdoms shall arise out of that nation, but not with its power. So this is speaking of the future at that time, which was fulfilled in Greece. So we covered this. It's pretty self-explanatory. The ram with the 2 horns is the Medes and the Persians. The male goat is Alexander the Great in the Greek Empire. The broken horn is Alexander's death, and the 4 in its place is his divided empire, which was divided up between his 4 generals. So this has already happened in history. We know this has already happened. We'll move on to the last few verses here. Verse 23, and in the latter time of their kingdom, when the transgressors have reached their fullness, a king shall arise having fierce features, who understands sinister schemes. His power shall be mighty, but not by his own power. He shall destroy fearfully and shall prosper and thrive. He shall destroy the mighty and also the holy people. Verse 25, through his cunning he shall cause deceit to prosper under his rule, and he shall exalt himself in his heart. He shall destroy many in their prosperity. He shall even rise against the prince of princes, but he shall be broken without human means. So here we have in the latter time of their kingdom, the prophecy in this passage reads, it's equally true of both Antiochus and the Antichrist. And so this is an example of prophetic passage, or a prophetic passage that has both near and a far fulfillment. Having the fierce features, Antiochus was known for his cruel brutality. And this is also going to be true of the coming Antichrist, who understands sinister schemes. So this, through his cunning, the Antiochus was known for his flattery and his smooth tongue. It's kind of how he got into his position as king. The coming Antichrist is going to confirm a covenant with Israel and the many nations surrounding. He will have this gift of gab, the same type of power through speech. He will be able to conquer through speech. His power shall be mighty, but not by his own power. So Antiochus Epiphanes was empowered by Satan, and this empowering was allowed by God, and the same is going to be true of the coming Antichrist. It's going to be to fulfill his purpose. Says to prosper, or shall prosper and thrive. Antiochus Epiphanes looked like a total success. The coming Antichrist will also look like a complete winner until God topples his reign. So remember, he's going to be the guy with all the answers, the Mr. Fix-It guy. Um, he shall destroy the mighty and also the holy people. Antiochus Epiphanes not only destroyed his enemies, but he also harshly persecuted the people of God. The coming Antichrist will also destroy and persecute the people of God, the saints, tribulation saints, and the Jewish people. If we look at numbers, Antiochus, he murdered approximately 100,000 Jews. Compare that to Hitler in World War II. Nazi Germany put to death about 6 million Jews. If we go by today's number, if the Antichrist was to come today or to start persecuting, the Great Tribulation was, I should say, if the Great Tribulation was today, there's about 11 million Jews will be put to death by the Antichrist. We have, I think, roughly 16 million Jews in the world today. So 2/3 will fall by the Antichrist. He shall cause deceit to prosper. So both the rule of Antiochus Epiphanes in the past and of the Antichrist in the future are both marked by deceit. The coming of the lawless one is according to the working of Satan, with all power, signs, and lying wonders, and with all unrighteousness or unrighteous deception among those who perish, because they did not receive the love of the truth, that they might be saved, which we read last week in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. He shall exalt himself in his heart. So his pride, Satan, remember the fall of Lucifer was that the original sin was pride. So he will be like Satan in this, that he will exalt himself in his heart. It's interesting that the coins that Antiochus Epiphanes had inscribed or were inscribed with this title, Theos Epiphanes, which means God manifest. So the coming Antichrist is also going to exalt himself, so that he sits as God in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God. Again, 2 Thessalonians 2. He shall even rise against the prince of princes. So no, Antiochus Epiphanes, he hated the people of God and fought against them. It was because he really hated God. The same will be true with the coming Antichrist. He will hate the Jews because he hates God. And even so, the Antichrist will attempt to wage war against Jesus Christ when Christ comes in Revelation 19, gathers the nations together to fight against the Lord. He will be broken without human means. So history tells us that Antiochus died of disease and not by the hand of man. In a similar way, no man will defeat the coming Antichrist. It will be by the hand of Jesus, who will strike him down. Verse 26, and the vision of the evenings and the mornings, which was told is true. Which was told is true. Therefore, seal up the vision, for it refers to many days in the future. So we see something similar. We will see, and when we get to chapter 12 of Daniel, that Daniel's commanded to seal up the book until the end. So when many would run to and fro, and knowledge would increase. So this is something similar. He's going to seal up. He's told to seal up the book or the vision. So Daniel must do this because in his day, the vision referred to a period of time in the far distant, in its ultimate fulfillment. And so for us, that time is near. Revelation 1:3 It says, "Blessed is he who reads and those who hear the words of this prophecy and keep those things which are written in it, for the time is near." So Revelation tells us the time is near. Also in Revelation 22, it says 22:10. It says, "And he said to me, do not seal up the words of the prophecy of this book, for the time is at hand." So our last verse here, and this is our last section, I'll go through it, and then we're almost here right on time. So and I, Daniel, verse 27, "And I, Daniel, fainted and was sick for days. Afterward I arose and went about the king's business. I was astonished by the vision, but no one understood it." So he was fainted, and he fainted and was sick. He was astonished. Why would God allow such a mighty persecutor of his people to come to power and with seeming success? The whole vision made him sick, for days. But he arose and went about the king's business. So after feeling better, he went back to work, doing what he did for the king. It says no one understood it. So it wasn't because God never wanted this prophecy to be understood, because really there's no reason for God to reveal something to man that can never be understood. And the reason why no one understood is because the vision sealed up in light of its ultimate fulfillment in Daniel's distant future. It's worth repeating, the verses in Revelation. Do not seal up the words, Revelation 22, "Do not seal up the words of the prophecy of this book, for the time is at hand." Chapter 1, verse 3, "Blessed is he who reads and those who hear the word of this prophecy and keep those things which are written in it, for the time is near." So the time is at hand, the time is near. We're going to see, as we get into these last days, we see things progress. The things that Jesus told us to look for in the Olivet Discourse, we'll see things progress as birth pangs, and things will happen in frequency and intensity. So once it starts, like a birth, when birth pangs start, they don't stop. They continue, and they may start slowly, but they continue going at intensity and in frequency. So that's how we will see things happen in the last days, and ultimately see, we shouldn't be here if we're going to be raptured out, but ultimately the Antichrist will be revealed to the world when we are out of here. So that is the conclusion of chapter 8. Do we have any questions?